So yeah, thanks, Lyle. Josh. So I'm going to talk to you today about React and how a trip to Russia isn't all it seems. So I've got a little story running throughout, which hopefully you'll enjoy. So I'm Josh Left. I'm at Held Together pretty much everywhere, and I'm a principal engineer at 383, based out of Birmingham. So for those of you that don't know us, probably quite a few, we kind of do a lot of customer experience stuff, primarily through kind of digital products and services, and that's kind of the way that we deliver our customer experience type stuff. And one of our clients came to us, and they wanted to effectively market the travel product to Russian speakers in their native country. This is kind of interesting because we didn't have an awful lot of experience with the Russian market. We didn't have an awful lot of experience with kind of foreign language sites full stop, like we've done some, but not to a great extent. So we thought we'd set out and do some research, try and figure out like who these Russian people are, what they like what gets them going about websites, and how we can get them to buy more stuff from the what is essentially an e-commerce website. So we started looking at some of the competition. This is Yandex, which is like the biggest search engine in Russia. It's kind of equivalent to Google. And this design is quite similar to Google. So that's fine. We thought, oh, there's nothing unusual there. Now this is mail.ru, and that's Russia's kind of equivalent of Yahoo. And again, there's a very simple design here. So at this point, we're kind of thinking, well, this is all right. Like, maybe Russian people like really simple websites with white background and black text and blue links, and like this is going to be a really simple project. In fact, this is vContact, which is their biggest social network, and this looks a lot like Facebook off of like 10 years ago, right? So at this point, we're kind of sat there and we're patting ourselves on the back and we're thinking, well, this is going to be really straightforward. You're going to get through it in like a week. And we started putting some designs together and we started testing them with some Russian users to kind of figure out what worked. And it was really weird. We started getting results that we weren't expecting. In fact, this is one of the pages on the website, and it looks nothing like a white background with black text and blue links. In fact, there's an awful lot of content here. And there's like a lot of images, and there's a lot of nested content, and there's a lot of places to click. And this was kind of built up iteratively from the white background, the black writing, and the blue text. And we went through some rounds of testing. We got to this, and we were thinking, like, this isn't what we signed up for, right? This is going to be a massive job, and we weren't expecting it. And we went back to the drawing board. We were trying to figure out exactly why Russian people might like these types of websites, why this might have resonated with Russian people. And we kind of realized that up until like 25 years ago, nobody in Russia had a credit card. They all paid cash for everything. They knew all of the local shops, but didn't really travel anywhere. So actually information was really important to them. That was one of the biggest things on the site. They wanted to be able to click around, find as much information about the things that they were buying as possible, because they just weren't comfortable by putting their credit card into websites. And that wasn't something that they really did a lot. And they needed the comfort that this was like a legit website where their money wasn't going to get scammed and they were actually going to get something for it. So let's take a look at this component. So here we've got a card with some slides that open out when you click into it, and a gallery. And this is like really heavily nested, right? But I promise you that they went for this. This was what they wanted. We didn't kind of just decide that we were going to hide all the information away. And this was going to be like fully content managed. They need to be able to go in and they need to be able to add hotels. And we're thinking, right, how on earth do we deal with that? We sat down and kind of started brainstorming like what this admin might look like so that they could go in and edit some of this stuff. And we got to something that looked kind of like this, which is obviously pretty complicated because there's so much information and it's all like very heavily nested. And there's a lot of JavaScript stuff going on. So this is basically a WordPress site. So this is WordPress media library that we're tying into here. And there's a huge amount going on. And it's super heavily nested. And again, we were just like, where do we even start with this? We've not built anything like this before. We've got no clue what's going on. Do we render the page on the server and then let the client side pick up like the adding new rows and adding new fields and stuff? But that's kind of tricky because I'm sat there and thinking, well, if I'm building it once, I'm going to build it correctly so I can reuse it. Like, I'm not going to build something as complicated as this and then have to do it again like 2 months down the line. And because I wanted to be able to set dynamically what the fields were, so whether it was an image, whether there was a text field there, whether it was like a big text box, that was another piece of information that the client side had to know as well as the server side. So we started looking at a JavaScript solution. We started kind of figuring out whether something like Angular might work. But that feels really kind of heavy. We didn't want to put all of Angular inside WordPress and have like these two apps running kind of concurrently on the same page. That's going to be super slow. So we kind of were putting our heads together trying to figure out like what might be out there, and we got to React, and we're trying to figure out, is React a tool that we could use? We knew nothing about it. We kind of read it. We'd seen it on Reddit, and we'd seen it on Hacker News or whatever. And what we've seen was it kind of had this XML-like syntax, so maybe this was like a hello world component that would kind of expand out and become an actual HTML stuff that's on the page. And that maybe it's like defined by data. So here we've got a scoreboard on line 3 where you're passing in presumably like an array of game scores. And that would be enough that the React could go and like figure out how to make this actually into some proper HTML. So we're like, okay, cool. So this is enough of a like kernel of an idea that we're going to go and explore React and we're going to play with it a lot. In fact, the ideal scenario for this bit is if maybe we could kind of define what these things are, pass in some data at the top, and it would just magically make the admin, and we could go in and play around with it. And actually, this isn't far off from where we ended up. So if you're ready, let's dive into React and let's start playing. So first off, a few basics. React is not a framework. We kind of throw it in there with the likes of Angular and Ember and Meteor and all the rest of them, but it's not. It's actually a view library. It's the view in your MVC app. And in fact, it can be used with the other frameworks. If you wanted a complete Angular app and you wanted to throw React in there to handle all your views, that's fine. There's no issues there. They don't conflict. And React is made up of components, which is a mixture of the views and the functionality that's tied to them. So they come as one complete package. And that's kind of cool for the types of products we're looking to build now, because we have a lot more people working on them. And I don't care what your component does. I just want to put it in my app. I don't want to figure out how to tie it in, what data I need and where to put it and all the rest of it. All I want to do is say, right, I want this component on my page. And this is where Facebook kind of started with it. It was the message notification that appeared on their web app. And they wanted to say, right, well, if you want a message notification, just put the message notification React component on the page and we'll figure out the rest for you. If the data comes in, we'll alert the user and say, there's a new message for you. If not, don't worry about it. Okay, however, having said that, there is a React routing library, so if you did want to make a full one-page app in React, that's perfectly possible. And there's a suggested application architecture that's different from MVC. So I immediately dived in and I said, oh, it's different from MVC because that's the paradigm that we used to work in so often. We've got our models that contain the data, views which show it on the page, and controllers which kind of hook it together and deal with some of the interactions and stuff. But Facebook decided that this wasn't the best way of doing it, and MVC wasn't the way forward, and actually they came up with their own application architecture, which fully embraces kind of JavaScript's event-driven nature, and it makes a lot of sense. So we'll kind of touch on that towards the end. So first, what is this XML-like syntax? Well, it's JSX, and it's an extension to JavaScript. So we're creating an app variable here with a hello component and passing some data. So the subject here is world. That's fairly straightforward. That's fairly intuitive. And it compiles to JavaScript. So using React, we can create an element. We pass in hello, which is a component, some data in the second argument there, so subject is world, and if we wanted some children, we put them where the null is on the third line. And we can do this kind of as an offline conversion once. We can do it during our build process every time we save, or we could do it during at runtime, which has its benefits as well. But what is hello? Hello is a React class. It's a component. So here we call the class factory of React, passing in an object which has got a render method. So as long as there's a render method in there, that can figure out kind of how to output stuff, then React will accept it and say, this is a perfectly valid component, I'll make it for you. But notice how here, we're saying this is a really simple one, h1 tag with hello, and then we're printing out the subject property. So the data that we passed in is subject. But this isn't a HTML string, there's no quotes around it. The h1 tags are themselves React components, which is pretty interesting. So when we come to render it, we've kind of built up this full representation of what our view looked like. And then we pass it to the React DOM, and we say document.get element by ID. So we've got an actual hook on the page, and we kind of inject the hello world into that element. But that's kind of cool because it means that the render is separate from the representation of your view. So is it possible to write a renderer for other platforms? Could we write once and use on any device? In Facebook's case, could they write a message notification component and use it on their iOS app, their Android app, and on the website? Well, it turns out you can. That's the thing, otherwise I wouldn't have mentioned it. And it's called React Native, and if you want to find out more, there's a link here. So I'm not going to go into it today, but just kind of bear in the back of your mind that as you're building up your view representation, you could use it everywhere as long as that platform knew how to kind of render that representation of the view. Okay, everyone ready? Everyone got that? You're now ready to build the admin system that you showed kind of earlier on. So I'm going to take a slightly easier example to deal with. So we've got a list of countries here, which is the group. That has a text field, which is the country name. Another group nested within inside it, so a list of cities. And the city can have a city name and a population. And that looks kind of like this when it kind of builds out. So very similar to kind of what we saw up front. I'm going to walk you through the group if you're up for it. So far, we only talked about kind of passing data in at the start. So those properties are immutable. You don't want to get changing them like during the use of your app because nothing's going to realize that it's changed and nothing's going to happen. So each of these components has their own state, and the getInitialState method is called on the first time it's the component is instantiated. So here I've said, well, if we're passing in some data, great, we'll use that, and we'll kind of return rows is the array, and if not, we'll just return an empty array of rows. So there'll be no elements there to start with. And while we're at it, let's add a new row method. So this looks very similar to how it would be in like jQuery, in that we just say on click, call add new row, prevent the default action, and then all we do is append a new object to this array of rows. So this is really simple. There's nothing weird going on. But because of the state, this component then turns around to the rest of the app and says, I'm dirty, I'm ready for a redraw because my data's changed. And it will then go and call the render method, which again is really simple. All we do is loop over all the data, so this.state.rows.map, and we just return a row for each one of those. And we pass in this.props.children, which is all the nested elements of this component. So we don't care what they are, we'll just make sure that each row has got all of them. And then we return it really simply with a div, with a title, all the row nodes, and then one more row which has got just a button with an on-click handler that calls this.addNewRow. So that's pretty simple, right? There's nothing too fancy going on here. And actually, by the time we get on the page, all we've done is built up some proper HTML that you can use in any other way that you would have used it before. There's nothing magic going on here. There's nothing hidden behind the scenes. There's a few extra attributes, but nothing weird is going on. So we've built up this input, and this input is kind of like a heavily nested form where we've got planet, countries, and the first country, and the cities, and the first city has got the name, and that's San Francisco here. But this is kind of weird because we've got state tied to components, and that's kind of generally like a bad thing, right? We don't want to do that too much. It works in this case because all we're doing is building up a massive HTML form. But what if we want to reorder the list? The drag handler would be on the row, but the entire group would be invalidated when the data changed, and it would need to redraw the whole thing. Do we give each row like a reference to its parent object? Well, that's weird because then there's so much like so many references floating around that we don't want to do it. So that's kind of the problem with the model view controller paradigm. We've got a lot of models, they're all kind of talking to each other, the views are changing the model data, the models might be changing the model data, and really everything's going on here in a weird way. And this kind of breaks one of the benefits that we found of using React. Like, we didn't want to have to know what was going on with any of this. We wanted someone to build a component, and it could be in a different team, could be in a different building, could be in a different city. All we wanted to know is that we needed this one component, and all we wanted to do was put it on the page, and it knew how to get all its own data, and there was nothing weird going on. We didn't need to figure out how to plumb all this stuff in. So Facebook came up with a solution, and they called it Flux. So you replace your models with a store. So all the data is in the store. The store passes data to the views. Views create actions on on clicks or whatever. The actions are passed to the dispatcher, and the dispatcher just goes all the way back to the store, changes the data there, and then we're in a position to start again. The views will re-render because they've got new data, there's new actions, and it's a big loop. So this is called Flux, and there's a link there if you want to find out more, because it does go a lot more in depth than that, but on the surface, that's what it is. Okay, so in summary, we found React was really good with its self-contained components. The view and the functionality were tied together, so it was good for our team because it meant that we didn't have to talk to each other any more than we actually have to. The data represents the views. If you pass some data into the same component, as long as it's the same data, it's going to render the same view every single time. Which is kind of cool because it means that, all right, well, maybe we could render it on the server, pass all the HTML down to the page, the user gets to see the HTML as soon as it loads, and then we'll let React take over, and there's a lot more, and kind of go from there. And we've got the cross-platform components. So we write the definitions on each platform. We need to know actually what a message notification icon looks like on Facebook. But as long as one person writes that, the rest of us can just use the React component and say, put that on that page or on that view. And so that, ladies and gentlemen, is why a trip to Russia isn't all it seems. So, has anyone got any questions?
How did you solve the CSS dependency problem?
CSS?
Yeah, when you import a custom element, a custom component.
Yeah.
If you need some CSS,
yeah,
probably you have to insert him.
Okay, so that's where the JSX comes in. So although it looks very much like XML or HTML, that's not what is actually put on the page. We compile it down and it becomes actual HTML by the renderer. So by the time it gets onto the page, it's just proper HTML, the same as if you'd written it out manually. So your CSS just works as long as you use actual proper HTML elements like an H1 or a div or whatever.
But the tricky one is if you want to style your component in a way,
yeah,
as the component creator, and you want that this styling is easily important. I mean, I've used the Radium,
yeah,
which is a React library,
and
its philosophy is to using the inline CSS.
And
that's the only way I found. So I was.
Okay, yeah, I understand that. So that was more of a culture thing. We solved that by a culture thing. So we have got quite a big build process that will take all of our SAS and make it into one file, but the files are completely disparate and kind of spread everywhere. So as long as the person making the component knows how to put some CSS into the build process, then that's how we do it. We didn't do anything any more advanced than that.
Hi. Thanks, Flux. I have a question about the quality of components, especially after the discussion that is still ongoing about web components moderation. Because we, as developers, let's say, or designers, we have responsibility to create these components to be accessible, performant, teamable, whatnot.
Yeah.
Because of React's boom, has there been some sort of discussion about that kind of moderation, or we don't want to have the same story with takeaway plugins?
Right. Yeah.
As it was with
Yeah. So, yeah, you're right. Obviously, you need to kind of be careful as you're designing them, and we wouldn't go and kind of just say, right, you do not need to write your own React components. You just go to GitHub and figure out which one do you want? Which was the problem with jQuery, wasn't it? Like that people would just kind of go into jQuery.com or whatever and like downloading whichever plugin they thought might work. So actually we're writing our own. It's fine for our needs. Yes, you need to be kind of careful that you're not being stupid with them and like just using anything off the shelf. But we haven't encountered that problem yet. Any more?